Hello and welcome back to Perspectives, bringing you our daily dose of news and views covering the topics we hope are relevant to you. Today, riots hit the headlines here in the UK, and we report their impact on our resident Sikh population. A farmer recounts his torture at the hands of police after his arrest during the protests. We continue to report on the dangers of organised crime and its influence on the community's youth, and we also take a quick look at the ongoing situation in Bangladesh. So joining me as always for Perspectives is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and good morning to all of our amazing viewers out there. Thanks for once again joining us here.
Indeed, and together we'll be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. Of course, as always, we'll take a look at lots of your great comments, which as usual have fortunately been filling below our videos on a daily basis, so we will discuss those at the end of the show. But let's get things moving forward, and with our first story, James, what have you got for us?
Well, I thought I would start out today in a follow-up to the story that we were talking about a few days ago with the Dollywall crime group in Canada. And I thought that we would give some information to parents about how these individuals are recruiting, not only for the gangs, but also in the human trafficking and in the sex world. It's been a big topic, not only with the Dollywall crime group, but also with the Olympics. They had a large arrest and sting there of human trafficked girls that were brought into Paris for the purpose of entertaining men, we'll say. And so they did have a big crackdown. And I thought that we would be very proactive in giving our viewers some information that they may or may not be aware of, and hopefully, bring that to light and give you a few tools to watch for warning signs with your own children, and for those you can pass the information on for, whether it's grandchildren and so forth. Now, who are the gangs targeting? The gangs traditionally, and these are a lot of youth gangs and others, so this is also applicable, as I said, when they are recruiting girls for human trafficking and to get them away from their families. And this is without geographical boundaries. This is whether it's in the UK, the US, Canada, and any other country. It's a very similar pattern that the gangs tend to utilize to recruit the youth. And they tend to do it in a slow process and methodical, so that it is not as in your face, or the youth don't even realize that they're being groomed and brought into the gang activity. And so new residents are citizens. Of course, as families relocate from one country to another, the children and the youth have a need of a sense of belonging, and that is with a peer group, with kids in their school or in extracurricular activities and so forth. And when that is broken and they find it hard to make new friends, of course, the gang leaders and the recruiters are going to prey upon that to give them that sense of belonging and that sense of popularity. So this is one of the many tactics that they utilize. Of course, at higher risk are youth from broken homes. When there is less parental supervision or interaction and communication, it makes it easier for these recruiters, again, to get in on the good graces of your child or your youth and to slowly bring them into their world. And of course, when you look at isolated or outcast youth who don't have a sense of belonging, once again, it's much like when they're in a new city, a new country, a new region. Again, the gangs prey on this and they watch for these things. And believe it or not, they're much better at recruiting children and youth than the military is in recruiting. So it's a really slippery slope to really be aware of, and to bring that to your forefront of mind as a parent, as somebody who mentors youth, as an uncle and aunt, and just watch for warning signs and indicators, but also try to be more preemptive and just head it off at the pass. Youth, of course, are impressionable by money, by power, by popularity, material items. So whether or not that is increasing their likes and their views and their friends on social media, whether or not it is seeing, the other teens that may be riding around with really nice cars or having wads of cash, gold on their neck, all of that sort of thing. They use that to entice them and to impress them and give them that false sense of security that they too can have these things. Now, it's very difficult for youth when they are feeling vulnerable or when they are in vulnerable positions to be aware that they're being groomed or being brought into these gangs. So again, we all as youth had our blinders on and we think, we're everything and the only thing that matters, when in fact people are manipulating them and they don't see it. Youth with learning disabilities, when they are trying to hide learning disabilities or having challenges in school, of course, that causes a great embarrassment, and it can most times cause the child to be more introverted. These individuals watch for that and teach them how to be more extroverted and to be more accepted and confident in themselves through other activities that they may be able to, whether it's drug dealing, whether it is violence or other things. They try to make them feel good about themselves by showing them they can be good at these things if they're not good at learning. So again, these are really important warning signs. Youth from dysfunctional homes. So if there is a lot of dysfunction or a lot of chaos in the home, the youth may be looking to regain a sense of control over their own lives that they're missing at home. And by doing so, they act out in other ways. They may be a bully, they may get in with the gangs and so forth, and that gives them that regained sense of control over their own destiny, over their own life and their own emotions. So just different things to look at. We have several other things that you can look at, and what are the youth getting out of it? Well, I think we've covered most of that in what they are being manipulated for, and that is money, peer acceptance, false sense of friendships, a false narrated means of relationships. So they're not understanding that they're being manipulated, and they're getting that false understanding of that this is a normal way for friendships and relationships to progress. Of course, the sense of power and control over others and over their own life. When we take a look at the risks to youth, of course, most gang members over time end up either in jail or dead. It is a very dangerous world that, again, the youth do not see down the road, that far future ramification of being involved in that activity. Instead, youth are very much centered on the here and now and what are the benefits and the rewards of immediacy. So once again, you've got to look for the misguided concept of love and friendship, the broken relationships with family and former friends. They are looking once again at the immediacy of acceptance, power, control, and what they think is love by their friends or girls, guys, whatever the case is. But they get that really twisted sense there, and they don't understand that they're actually pushing away true friends or true family who are going to stand by them no matter what, and they don't see that long-term impact on their lives. So it also, of course, increases the probability of use of alcohol and other substances. And of course, that leads to more criminality and potentially overdose or death. So there's a much higher incidence at that rate once they've been brought into the gang activity. Especially when it comes to human trafficking, the traffickers or the recruiters tend to get the girls hooked on different pharmaceuticals and narcotics, and then utilize that to manipulate them into moving forward to prostitution or other issues and activity that are of benefit to the gang and not the individual, of course. Again, we look at ways to reduce the risk. So positive communication, keeping that open line, no matter how busy you are at work, especially if you are in a new community or a new country. Sometimes you lose track when you're trying to balance everything, including getting the food on the table, the bills paid, a roof over your head, and just balancing it all while also trying to reconnect with your own social circles. The children and youth sometimes seem independent, but they still need you to have that commitment to them and that time with them, as well as to increase communication, not decrease it, no matter how confident you are that they are adjusting well. Kids are very, very good at hiding that. And so there's a few other points that I'm going to let you take a look at that are on the screen here, but I don't want to go on for too long. But I just want to bring up some of these things because, as stated, there is always an increased level of risk at these at these situations, especially for youth and children. This is something that we have seen going back to the 70s, whether it was in South Central Los Angeles, New York, Canada, London, England, anywhere that you see gang activity, they are recruiting. And of course, it is a big issue today as much as it was back then. And of course, we don't want to see more children lost to gang activity. We don't want to see more individuals just losing their lives or their sense of direction. So I thought, in follow-up to the story that we did with the Dollywall gang, I would bring this forward. I've seen the worst of it. When I finished high school many years ago, I actually worked in youth services down in South Central Los Angeles in Watts, Crenshaw. I was there after the Rodney King incident and shortly after the race riots. So I saw firsthand the devastation that the gang and the riots and the divisiveness can have on a community and how long it took to heal. And it's still not fully healed there. But the gang activity has definitely been reduced as to what it was at that point. But it's still a major concern around the world. And I hope that you take that information, learn from it, share it with others, and we'll bring you more information from time to time. If you have questions, by all means, don't be shy to email directly if you want to keep it off of our chat board or our comment section, but feel free also to put them on the comment section if you want to do so. Back to you, Angus. I know that there has been a history of gang activity in the UK, just as there is in every other major city and country around the world, and I thought that it was an appropriate time after that story the other day to bring it up.
Yeah, it is an epidemic that has affected so many communities across the world, literally across the world. I don't think there can be a country that's immune to this problem. I think what is very interesting is reading that, and of course a lot of it is, it's pretty common knowledge how these things happen, why these things happen. I think one thing that struck me was the methodology that these crime gangs use, these organised crime gangs, to recruit people into their organisations. It runs very parallel to many other organisations that follow the same methods. At one extreme end, you've got the criminal gangs, but then you've also got the religious cults who use the same sort of methodology. Then all the way to the other extreme is the political extremists use, again, exactly the same methodology. They tend to target the same sort of people. These people are from difficult backgrounds, broken backgrounds, dysfunctional families. They are vulnerable. Young, they're people with issues or who come from families with big domestic issues, whatever they may be. And usually they come from very poor areas where poverty is rife. There are huge problems just surviving as a family in terms of keeping a roof over their heads, keeping food on the table. And the kids, the children, they suffer in an environment that is so difficult to be nurtured well within. And of course they may come from broken homes, etc., and parents who basically struggle to bring these children up. So yeah, they are vulnerable. They are prey to these organisations, whether, again, as I say, it's political, it's religious, or it is just simple criminal gangs. Now, how do you tackle this? Well, it has to be a multilateral approach. Firstly, of course, it's parenting. If there are parents involved and the parents have a genuine fear, and one hopes that in all these cases there at least are some family members who want to prevent these things happening, then there is, of course, a parental responsibility. Now, there is no easy way to be a parent. There is no idiot's guide book out there that everybody can read to learn how to be a parent. If there was, it would have been written a billion years ago. So there is no one single way to be a good parent. Unfortunately, we all have to learn as it happens and just hope that we get it right. There is no easy solution to that. But what is important is that we are, as parents, all aware how these things happen. As James, as you pointed out in your very useful guide there, it's being aware of the signs, being aware of the symptoms, being aware of how these things happen and how our young are seduced by these gangs, these cults, these extremists, etc. And then, of course, there's the higher level, the governmental level, the managerial level, let's call it, that manages our society. And of course, a lot of these problems stem from very simple society structures that are a problem. We have, in most countries, we have ghettoization. This is where many communities live effectively in an unintegrated way. In other words, they live in what has been described in some areas, and certainly in some countries, we have ghettos of communities. Now, these communities might be of certain ethnicities or religions or whatever, and it is that, again, that helps these gangs prey on these, because many of these ghettos end up being poor, there's a lot of poverty, etc., etc. So there has to be a greater breakdown of these ghettos, of these separating these communities from the greater society. Because when everybody's involved, it helps dilute these issues. It basically allows other communities to get involved to help those who may be more vulnerable. So it's, again, part of it is a greater integration and less of a separatine. What's the word I'm looking for? Separation. That's the word. It's trying to reduce the separation of communities from the greater society. So I think it's a very sad thing. But James, as you said, it's being aware of how these things happen, what causes these, and being aware of that helps people just to tackle it. And as I say, I think from a greater level, from a higher level, from governmental level, there is also a greater governmental responsibility to help prevent these things happening as well. And as I said, it's an interesting parallel to when we talked about the RSS yesterday or the day before. A lot of their methodology, ironically, follows that same preying on the vulnerable, preying on those who are more vulnerable to being seduced into that sense of belonging. It's giving them something. These young who feel maybe a bit marginalised, feel a bit on the peripheries. It gives them a sense of belonging to something. They suddenly become part of a gang. They feel important. It's bigging their lives up, and that's again something that we need to be aware of, and providing it from better sources. So yeah, James, thank you for that. Very interesting and very helpful.
No problem. And keeping with our time here, we're a little tight, but I do have a second story that's actually quite brief because I had a feeling this one might go a little long. Just given that it is such an important topic, I didn't want to rush that one. However, the second story I wanted to share with you is just an update on Bangladesh. And we're seeing now a lot of the international embassies and consulates that are in Bangladesh pulling out non-essential staff. Not only are they pulling out non-essential staff, they are also recommending that any Bangladesh expats that are in foreign countries do make sure that they follow any local, federal, and state laws when it comes to protesting and rallying. Most recently, as you can see here, there were a lot of things going on, but in the United Arab Emirates, there were 3 Bangladeshis in the United Arab Emirates last month that were actually given life imprisonment, and 4 others were sentenced to deportation after serving a jail period, and that was because they gathered in riots to put pressure on their home country's government. So again, if you are an expat that's living outside of Bangladesh and you are going to take part in any civil unrest, protests, or rallies, make sure that you have researched and respected all of the laws of the country you are in. You are not protected by the same regulations, the same rights, the same laws of your homeland. You are subject to the laws of the country in which you are in, so make sure that you respect them and follow them. Once again, people are just asked to show restraint, to show respect, to show their support through peaceful and non-law-breaking ways. It is a very tumultuous and confusing time for a lot of people. And let's hope that the military and the acting government step in and get control of things in Bangladesh, and we see things returning to some level of normalcy for them, and return to some levels of peace. With that, Angus, as I said, I just wanted to keep that one short, but just give a brief update on where things are at in Bangladesh and developments that have happened over the last 24 hours.
Yes, it's Bangladesh is in an extraordinarily volatile situation at the moment. Of course, any country that suffers the sudden unexpected loss of a leader, finds itself in a period of limbo, and it's that period of limbo that literally anything could happen. Now, one positive thing, if I can use that word in a rather ironic sense, is that Bangladesh has been here before. It's gone through, I think it was 2007 was the last essential military coup. And the military have taken charge once again, of course, in a vacuum, once Hasina fled the country in fear for her life, literally, with rampaging mobs of angry citizens. Then the country is in this desperately dangerous situation of these mobs that could literally turn anywhere and turn on anyone. So control needed to be taken very quickly, and the military stepped in very quickly as they showed. They immediately went on to the main TV channel and essentially called for calm and said, look, now we are in charge. This is not a military coup, but we will take governance until democracy can be re-established, which is in many ways the best thing that could have happened. They need a firm hand at such a dangerous time just to keep the country operating and working. Now, the good thing is also that many of the citizens, despite the bubbling anger amongst the citizenship, is that there's a lot of celebration, obviously seeing Hasina leave, so the mood has actually turned quite positive in many places, which again means that a lot of that anger has dissipated, so the whole level of anger is reducing, which means people now are just concentrating on getting on with their lives again. Of course, there is still trouble here and there, because there will always be a section of society who want to take advantage of such volatile situations, but things do seem to be hopefully slowly returning to normal. Now, what I find interesting about this whole story is not just what happens next. It's the local geopolitics of this whole situation. Now, there's an awful lot of speculation going on social media about the relationship between Modi and Hasina. Was Modi a friend of Hasina? Was Modi propping up Bangladesh? But in turn, Hasina, actually, as it turns out, Bangladesh was a rising tiger. It was an economy that was booming under Hasina. She really, through her rod of iron, was really turning Bangladesh's economy around. And I believe, and somebody will correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe the per capita wealth of Bangladesh was actually rising above that of India. So she was actually doing some great things economically. She may not have been doing some great things democratically, but certainly she did seem to be turning that country around. So what happens in her absence, and what happens next? What political leader will arise next, and what direction will this new political leader take Bangladesh in the future? Will that leader be a friend of Modi and of India, or otherwise? We don't know. Let's see. But what has been interesting me over social media is a lot of commenters, and interestingly on the far right in India, many of the far right firebrands who love whipping up hatred and ill feeling. They've all been saying, okay, who's next? We've had Nepal, we've had the Maldives, we've had Sri Lanka, now we've had Bangladesh. Who's next? Could it be India next? And of course they all weighed in and say, no, Modi is a strong leader. He's faced the horrors of the West. And interestingly, a lot of these commenters are blaming the West, and particularly the US, who are known, let's be honest, to interfere quite often in foreign affairs and undermine leaderships around the world that they don't necessarily align with and disagree with. So there is a lot of accusations from the far right in India that maybe the West have been behind this collapse of the Hasina regime. I don't know if that's true. Who knows? The truth may never come out. But of course, they're saying, okay, that the West are also responsible for these other regimes that have collapsed. And these regimes, they claim, are left-wing regimes that have actually stood up to the Western hegemony. So again, they're trying to paint it as it's the wicked West that are bringing down these regimes. And of course, the wicked West are also against Narendra Modi. And they're trying to undermine Narendra Modi's regime, the BJP, and of course the RSS in India. So there is this speculation rife on social media that maybe we're targeting, the West are targeting India next. Well, who knows, but it does make an interesting debate. And of course, well, let's be honest, we do talk on a regular basis about could India itself break up? Now, I think we do talk about it a lot, and many of the people that I have even interviewed have speculated and given the possible methodology and the reasons why India is ripe for a breakup. And we've talked about it again regularly, that India is so culturally diverse, and this regime of the BJP has been so disinterested, and that's a euphemism, that not just been disinterested, they've actually deliberately marginalised their religious minorities and their ethnic minorities to the benefit of the majority Hindu population. And that, again, is a recipe for a breakup, for a political upheaval. And we said yesterday, Bangladesh fell through something really very small. It was one small catalytic event that snowballed, that gained momentum, and that grew and grew literally only over a matter of weeks until it reached that tipping point. Could India one day reach that tipping point? Could some single event in India, maybe even Manipur, maybe even the Punjab, we've seen political upheavals in the Punjab, for example, or even J&K, where we know is a bubbling cauldron of unhappiness and tension and unrest. Could one of these regions be that catalytic trigger that then starts that momentum building that could then potentially topple an Indian regime? Who knows? It's rife with speculation. It makes an interesting debate, James, and we've seen it across social media, and even the right-wing Hindutva population are even debating this very same topic. They're obviously robust, saying, of course, Modi will keep India together. He is a strong leader. But the very fact that they're even debating it is interesting in itself, James.
Absolutely, and we have to keep in mind all of the misinformation that gets out there and the propaganda. And that's something that I'll be talking tomorrow night about, are some new laws coming into effect in India in relation to news and media coverage. So we'll talk about that tomorrow, though.
Indeed. Okay, well, let's move on to my first story. And it's interesting because there seems to be a common theme amongst stories in different geographical locations. There's obviously something bubbling in the global water supply or something, because trouble is emerging everywhere, even here, of all places, in the UK. And for those who watch global news from our overseas audience, may well have noticed that in the UK, we are having serious social upheavals. We've got rioters in the streets. And we've talked a lot about bubbling cauldrons of unhappiness in India, in J&K and the Punjab and places like that. Well, here in the UK, even we are not immune to this same issue, because amongst many of our regions, we have very, very unhappy populations. And there has been a lot of unhappiness bubbling in British society for many years. And this has essentially been caused by what has been described as uncontrolled immigration. Now, we have a very multicultural society in the UK. And on the whole, it has been very successful. But there have also been a lot of issues. And again, I've talked about ghettoisation. And we have had issues of many ethnic minorities in the UK not integrating as best as they should have been. And this, of course, this has created tensions, society tensions. And this has allowed the far right wing, the extremists here in the UK, to grab onto this. And as a result of this, we've had a change of government in the last few weeks. We've now got this Labour government, Keir Starmer, and he has fanned the flames of tensions. And what has happened over recent weeks, and we talk about catalytic events, we had a very tragic event only, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, where three little girls were murdered by an individual, and I believe he's an immigrant. I'm not actually sure, and I will be corrected on that. But basically, it doesn't matter what the truth was. The perception was, as it was perpetuated by the right wing across social media particularly, is that it was an immigrant who'd done this. And this fanned the flames of what was already a tense situation here in the UK. And we've talked again in the past about this nuanced argument about immigration here in the UK. We have an anti-immigrant population here in the UK. We have a strong anti-immigration section of society, but we also, at the extreme, have a racist section. And those two communities, let's call them, are often blurred. So quite often we have many people who are against this uncontrolled immigration. And I'll just add in here that actually even many of our ethnic minorities are also united in being against uncontrolled immigration, because the issues here are essentially this country, the United Kingdom, is a small island. We only have finite resources. We only have a certain amount of land. We only have a certain amount of infrastructure, doctors, education, etc., that can support a certain level of population. Now, when our borders were opened, particularly by Tony Blair in the 1990s, we've had an influx of 10 million people since 1997. Now, 10 million people has grown our population from around about 55 million to around about 65 million. That's a huge growth in population. And our infrastructure here in the UK did not grow with it, which has caused tensions. And it's also meant that many people resident, indigenous in the UK, and I include ethnic minorities in that, they have realised that, hang on, we can't take so many people so quickly because our infrastructure can't cope with this. We cannot get a doctor's appointment for a month, etc., etc. So in the context of all that, anger has been rising amongst the indigenous population against immigrants who've been pouring over the English Channel. So as a result, the far right have seized upon this, and they've whipped up tensions from the far right side. And then on the other extreme, we've still got a problem of Islamic extremists who, in that community, have reacted with equal might. And we've now got these two extremes out on the streets facing off against each other. And one side calls the other fascist, the other side calls the other anti-fascist, but basically they're both extremists. And in the middle, we've got the majority of our population who just want to get on with our lives peacefully, integrate and all get along happily, stuck in the middle. And as a result of this, we are now having riots on our streets. And worse still, Keir Starmer, who should be taking charge of the situation, has come out on television in front of the cameras and made these angry speeches blaming one side only, the far right, fanning the flames of anger because actually a large part of the population who are most definitely not far right also think we have a problem, and you're not addressing the root cause of this problem. Instead, you're just blaming one section of society, you're blaming everybody as far right, and what all that is doing is it is increasing support for the rioters. So now we've got this volatile situation here in the UK, which means that more and more people are taking to the streets and things are running out of control. And in the middle, unfortunately, are many of our ethnic minority populations. And of course amongst that is our Sikh community, who on the whole are an extremely peaceful society, but they are now finding themselves the target of these crimes and these rioters that are taking to the streets. Now, I would say that the Islamic population is probably taking the brunt of this. Mosques are being now attacked by far-right extremists, but of course Gurdwaras are also potentially vulnerable. We talked about the security situation here. And of course, many far-right people, let's just to be kind, are not that well educated. They just see somebody with a brown skin or somebody who's not quite looking the same as them, particularly with a turban on. Well, they must be one of them then. So of course, Sikhs are ultimately vulnerable to this same type of hate crime, this racism. So unfortunately, we have this dreadful situation brewing in the UK. It is extremely worrying, not least for ordinary people like myself, but most especially for our Sikh community, who must be living in fear of what is around the corner. And a lid needs to be put on this situation, not the way Keir Starmer is doing it, by fanning the flames, by saying he's just going to pour the army and the police onto the streets. All that does, as we've seen in India, is just increase the anger, increase support for the rioters. You're polarising the situation. You're forcing people to take sides instead of pouring calm on the situation. There's a very interesting meme that has crossed social media, and I've seen it once or twice. It's a very clever meme, and it's simply a picture of a laughing man, and the caption reads something like, "It's the elite laughing whilst civil war brews instead of revolution." And it's a very clever meme, that, because all it's saying is that those that are pulling the levers of power are laughing at us, because all they're doing is deliberately stirring up unrest, between the left and the right, between these two extremes, instead of all of us uniting and turning on those people who are actually creating these divisions. And this is a parallel that runs not just here in the UK, it runs across the world. It runs in India, of course, in Canada, in the US. Every country has this issue. Who is really pulling the levers of power? Because all they are doing, this divisive attitude, this divisive methodology that they are using, is dividing our societies. It is pitching the left against the right. And even those labels aren't even necessarily relevant. It is pitching any side against another. It's pitching Hindus against Sikhs. It's pitching Sikhs against Muslims. It's pitching Hindus against Sikhs. It's pitching all of us against each other at a time when we should actually be uniting and turning on them, whoever they are. We don't know. They live in the shadows. It's all very conspiratorial. But I'll tell you something, everything I am seeing in the media, I am seeing even Elon Musk on Twitter is fanning the flames himself. Keir Starmer, our own Prime Minister here in the UK, is fanning the flames. What is going on? I don't know. Now, I've gone slightly off tangent here, James, and apologies for that, because we have a real problem, a real situation brewing here in the UK, and it really needs for the lid to be put back on it very quickly. And I'm just going to go try and get back onto topic here.
Yeah, we're seeing the same challenges in North America as well, where there's so much divisiveness and there's just the one side fanning the flames and just, it's politicians right down to the rednecks. I mean,
Yeah, what is going on? There is something going on. There is some power behind the scenes stirring up trouble because the smoke is there. The question is, what is the fire? Now, I want to get slightly back on topic here, because the Sikh network here in the UK did a press release yesterday, obviously in the face of what's going on. And they said, in the face of ongoing shocking racism and far-right fascists causing havoc and spreading hate on the streets of the UK, we want to urge all the Sikh organisations, groups and gurdwaras to remain vigilant and to support all those minorities being discriminated and targeted. There is no room for hatred on ethnic or religious grounds in the UK, and we will stand with all who are targeted, as is our Sikh values. And this has been copied into the Prime Minister, the Prime Minister's office, the UK Home Office, the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, Yvette Cooper, who's the Home Secretary, and the MP, who is the Minister of Security. And the organisation asked them to address the real issues and concerns of the Sikh community regarding anti-Sikh hate as raised by a report, and I'll quickly run through this report. We are keen to work with the new government to ensure all safety precautions and measures are in place and available to Sikhs and Gurdwaras across the UK. Now, I'll just quickly flash through this report that they refer to, because it is a very interesting report. There's a lot of detail in it, which I'll just summarise it as quickly as I can. But it was an all-parliamentary group that sat 4 years ago, but it's as relevant today as it was 4 years ago. And all-parliamentary group means it sourced MPs from all parties, so it wasn't particular to the left or to the right. It was designed to produce a report that appealed to all sides of the political spectrum. Now, within the group, it included people like Preet Kaur Gill, who is at the moment a Labour Sikh MP, and she was an MP at that time. It also included Dabinderjit Singh, who I've interviewed on a couple of occasions, who is one of the key advisors to the UK Sikh Federation, and many other stakeholders within the Sikh community. And the aim of the get-together, the conference, was to try and agree a way forward about hate crimes against the Sikh community. And they did start with lots and lots of statistics, which actually made quite interesting reading, quite scary reading. And it only goes up to 2020, but they talked about the number of hate crimes in the UK. And back in 2016, 21%, or 1 in 5 Sikhs in the UK, had experienced a hate crime. That's about 100,000 Sikhs. Now, 3 years later, in 2019, it saw a 50% increase. So up to about 150,000 Sikhs in the UK experienced a hate crime. And then it rose 8% to the following year in 2020. Now, interestingly, in 2020, it reported that hate crimes, or religious hate crimes, against Muslims fell by 12.5%. But Jews fell by 9.3%, and for Hindus it remained about level. But for the Sikhs, hate crimes increased by about 7.3% for some reason, a staggering 61% increase. Now, one other interesting point was that 85% of respondents to the survey within the Sikh community said they did not report the hate crime because most of them, 8 out of 10, said it was because they thought it was a waste of time to report. They didn't think anything would be done about it, which is quite concerning and obviously it needed to be addressed. So, as a result, the biggest issue, as they discovered within the discussions, was that nobody actually has a proper definition of what is a hate crime. And certainly, what do we call it? It needs a term. Is it? And they essentially came up with the term anti-Sikh hate crime. So, as the results of this conference was that they concluded 3 main issues. There is a huge amount of underreporting of anti-Sikh hate crime. There's a lack of visibility on hate crimes because they don't know how to report it and how officially to record it. And anti-Sikh hate crime is on the rise. So the proposal was that because the government had failed so poorly, this was the Conservative government at the time, because the government had failed, that the Sikh network in itself, in partnership with many of the organisations within the community, particularly the Sikh Council, they are proposing to act as a third-party partner to record these sorts of crimes and essentially take charge of the whole process. So they, being experts in the issue, can actually then record and put into statistics, make facts what is going on, and etc. etc. And they did actually come up with the conclusions, which were that firstly, what is the actual definition of a hate crime, and secondly, what do we call it? Well, we call it anti-Sikh hate crimes. So it was a very successful conference. They came out with various conclusions that have been adopted and are still very much relevant today as they were 4 years ago. Now. And then just as one footnote to all this, ironically, is that I did notice in the Indian media, is that the Indian media, and particularly the High Commission of India, has reported officially now from the Indian government an advisory, a travel advisory to the UK, to Indians, is Indian travellers should be aware of the recent disturbances in some parts of the UK. And the High Commission is closely monitoring the situation. Visitors from India are advised to stay vigilant and exercise due caution while travelling to the UK. How ironic when it's usually the other way around. Now, India is getting its own back because we've got our own problems here in the UK, James. So even India is advising and cautioning travel to the UK.
That's a sad state, isn't it? When, it's half-assed backwards, but it's also founded. That's the worst part of it, Angus.
Isn't it just? Okay, we must move on. We've talked a lot about these issues, but yeah, it's a concerning time here in the UK. But let's move across to India now and the farmers' protest, which we have talked a lot about in the past, and an interview recently in the last few days has emerged of a gentleman, a 26-year-old farmer called Navdeep Singh. And he's a farmer who turned activist, and he was very active during the original farmers' protests in 2020 and 2021. This farmer originally comes from Ambala, which sits on the city on the Punjab-Haryana border. He was hailed as a hero after, this is the 2020 riots, after a video of him turning off a police water cannon during those protests went viral. Now, as a result of that, he was arrested this year, only a few months ago, in March, even though he performed this actual, what was called a celebrated act in November 2020. So it took a few years, 4 years almost, to arrest him, for the police to catch up with him. Now, after 4 months without trial, he was released on bail in July, a couple of weeks ago. Now, within a couple of days of being released, he spoke in this interview about the torture that he had experienced. And this included officers forcibly removing his turban and his clothes, so immediately a sacrilegious, offensive act, holding his head under water so he couldn't breathe, and threatening the lives of his family members. Now, Navdeep also reported being tied to a chair and having weights put on his legs to force them apart, making him unable to stand for hours, and leaving him thinking he was going to die. The authorities interrogated him why he was being such a hero, who was paying him to do these things. They seized access to his bank accounts and all his private affairs. Several members of the Indian authorities from the NIA, the National Investigation Agency, the CID and others were complicit in this torture, including the police inspector Harjinder Khera. Now, Navdeep, he's bailed for 2 cases, but because of what he did during the protests, he's been consistently harassed and intimidated by the police and eventually charged by the police. And when the first incident occurred, he was charged with attempted murder, of all things. And he, alongside the Bharatiya Kisan Union, the BKU president, Gurnam Singh Chaduni, they were both accused of breaking police barricades and attempting to run over policemen with their tractors. Now, Navdeep was also charged with violating, of all things, COVID-19 norms. Remember, this is 2020. And these charges were based on a complaint from the head constable, Pardeep Kumar, and included sections for rioting, unlawful assembly, obstructing public servants, and negligent acts likely to spread infection. So they're really scraping the barrel for charges here.
Yeah.
And the FIR, the First Information Report, claimed that some police officers narrowly escaped being run over by tractors. Now, this is despite that these actual actions were caught on camera, which completely contradicted the official police statement. So even the camera, what was recorded, videos, actually said the police were lying, basically. The incident drew widespread criticism across the political spectrum, including Arvind Kejriwal, Rahul Gandhi, head of Congress, Priyanka Gandhi and Captain Amarinder Singh, etc., etc. So, now I think not least the whole story of the farmers' protest, the one thing I take away from this that always we should highlight, this person, even if he's guilty, he was tortured. He was charged, he was put in jail, and he was tortured. When will the world wake up to this fact? This isn't, there's no ambiguity here. This is yet another accusation with evidence of torture in a police cell in India. Now, again, forgive me for ranting, but India proclaims itself to be a democracy. It claims itself to want to sit at the global top table. Narendra Modi shakes hands with the leaders of the free Western world. And yet, here in India, it is common practice in a police cell for prisoners to be tortured. Now, the West have very, very clear principles on torture. We will not accept intelligence from anybody who's been tortured. We will not do business with any country that condones torture. There's no ambiguity. It is very clear. Torture is unacceptable in any democracy, in any modern country, in any modern society that claims itself to want to be a first world country. And yet, once again, torture raises its ugly head. I get very angry about this, James. I'm sure you do.
Absolutely, and I'm right with you, Angus. We've talked about this many occasions recently and over the last year or so. And that's at all levels. But most recently, with the changes in the laws that Modi's making, giving more powers of discretion to the police to make more arrests, to be more aggressive and more violent towards people, it's not getting better. It's actually getting worse.
I am just astonished that no Western leaders stand up publicly and say, hang on, India, what's going on here? There is evidence of torture of ordinary citizens, particularly in the Punjab. Recently, we reported of an ordinary member in the Punjab, a Sikh, who was fighting the drug problem, was arrested, and he emerged days later with burn marks over parts of his body. And I won't mention which parts, but I think you can guess. Burn marks where he was electrocuted by the police. Yeah. So again, there's no dispute here. He was tortured in the most dreadful manners. So why is nobody in the West, no political leaders standing up and saying, stop this and calling it out publicly? It just astonishes me. Is it double standards? I don't know. But again, I get very upset about this because it is there. The evidence is there. It is so obvious, yet nobody at a political level in the West is calling it out for what it is. Anyway, we must move on because we're running out of time, James, as we always are. So let us move on now to our comment section. Now, wow, the comment section has ignited after particularly one of our stories last week. And we had a fabulous debate rumbling on. A lot of foes having a great, I would say, very civilized debate about many things that we talked about. Now, Cousineau, who's one of our resident contrarians, who was not afraid to wade in and make very sensible, very reasoned arguments, which really manages to upset many of our other regulars. And there's been some fabulous, really entertaining discussions on here. So Cousineau has said, he said, regarding the crime gangs, it's no big secret that a minority of Punjabis commit crime. And I think it's very hard to dispute that fact. Of course, all societies have an element that unfortunately has criminals amongst it. We can't deny it. Here in the West, even every society, every part of society has a criminal element. And it is likely, unfortunately, in the Punjab, that even within the Sikh community, there will be those who, should we say, cross the line. But now here's where things get really provocative. The RSS, they love Sikhs. And there are many Sikhs that identify with the RSS. I realise you and your subscribers may not like to hear this, but sometimes the truth hurts. Ooh, oh boy, did this ignite a debate. And unfortunately, I can't show all the comments and the to's and fro's on this. There was a lot of arguments about this. But if I've just selected a selection of these. B. Kara said, true, that there are a few idiots who are influenced by the RSS. The reason being, firstly, Brahmin's policy to control the masses is the policy of Sam Dam Dand Bed, politicians, members of Rashtriya Sikh Sangat, also called the RSS. Interesting point. RSS, like we talked about this in the past, they use very, very many subtle methods. They pop up in different guises to seduce people in. And it may well be that Sikhs actually have been seduced into the philosophy of the RSS without actually even realising it. So that's quite an interesting point. Secondly, the influenced ones are totally oblivious to the true history of the Greater Punjab since before and after 47, etc., etc. Again, a very good point is that many, and particularly the young, who are easily influenced, and James, you've touched on this significantly already, the young are very vulnerable to being persuaded, indoctrinated into ways that might really upset their parents. They are targets, particularly of the RSS. So this person is saying quite validly, actually, there may well be some young who have fallen into the RSS because they don't actually realise for what it is, and they don't understand the context of the Sikh history and the culture and the terrible tragedies that their families, particularly their ancestors, have suffered. So a very good point there, James. I think you'd probably agree with that, wouldn't you?
I absolutely do. And, when you look at the systemic and the generational failures of the past towards the Sikh people, a lot of the youngsters just don't comprehend the struggles that they've been through.
Yeah, and then Cruella, one of our regulars, and there's quite I would say, a healthy debate that's developed across our pages between these two foes, which has been really entertaining and it's been kept very civilised. So thank you to both of this for this. But Cruella says, one thing I hope you are loving RSS in India, that you're not in the West. No true Sikh would ever support the RSS, of course, for all the reasons that we discussed. And Cruella refers to renter Sikhs like Dr. Amarjit Singh's TV84. Again, this is a good point because, of course, organisations, and this isn't just particular to the RSS, but many organisations who are pushing an agenda deliberately recruit people on the other side to be their agents. And they say, oh, well, look, no, the RSS have got Sikhs standing up for the RSS. Indirectly, and of course they are the big influences because other Sikhs say, well, this Sikh says it's all right, so it must be all right. So it's very clever and it's a very dangerous methodology. And of course this Dr. Amarjit Singh, who I'm not aware of, I must confess I must look into this person, but yeah, they recruit agents essentially to act on their behalf. And Cruella basically says, just go back to your RSS channels, and very robustly says, look, if you call yourself a Sikh, there is no way that you would ever ally yourself to the RSS. And then, of course, refers to the sacred scriptures. The Guru Granth Sahib Ji is attacked daily, and you call yourself a Sikh. May Guru Ji bless you with the truth. So a lovely sign off there. And of course, Cousineau comes back very robustly, as expected. I would be disappointed otherwise. Many Sikhs in India do align themselves with the RSS principles. Most people in power in India love the Sikhs. I know this from personal experience. And the scriptures are attacked because the perps know it will cause a reaction. Stop overreacting. This refers back to a point that this person made yesterday or the day before, is that don't give them what they're looking for, which is a reaction. Now, S. Baines says, this is where it goes off on a slight tangent. My ancestors were Sikhs. what do they have to do with what we are now, except that they had the good sense to become Sikhs? And this is where I think Gaviol fails slightly, because this person says, what were they 600 years ago? And if I interpret this correctly, they're saying, look, 600 years ago, there were no Sikhs. The first guru hadn't appeared yet. So, but this is where actually the argument can be turned on its head. And so, look, all of us 10,000 years ago lived in caves or in mud huts or whatever it was and worshipped the sun or the moon or whatever. So in theory, we should all now still be worshipping the sun and the moon, etc. But religions evolve, etc., etc. So I think that final point I don't necessarily agree with. But I would point out that this has been a fabulous debate. Unfortunately, we have not been able to cover every single point because there were some great points that were made in that whole argument, James. Have you been following this one online?
Yeah, and people can get on there and take part in the debates at all different levels. We've got some great ones that go on within our chats and our comments. So
it has been highly entertaining.
Such behavior.
So thank you to all of you who waded in on that one. It was a great battle, a great verbal battle or word battle. Now, Jagtar Sidhu. This was an interesting one. Thanks, friends. Salute to the Prime Minister of Canada. We Sikhs love our Prime Minister, and many other Sikh from the Sikh community waded in with the same comment. Yes, we love Justin Trudeau, and Justin Trudeau has become very popular amongst the Sikh community in Canada. Now, this comment I brought out because I think this is a fascinating comment. Satpal Verma, he's not going to get you anything except using India against China for their own interests. Learn about politics. Eventually, the Sikhs will have to ally with China against an Indo-West alliance. Now, this is an interesting, complete turnabout of an interpretation of the future. I've not even thought about this one. Basically, what Satpal Verma is suggesting is that actually the West will eventually ally with India itself, which almost by implication, because the Sikhs are against India, let's keep it simplistic. So by virtue, if India allies with the West, then the Sikh community will have no choice but to ally with China. So this means that it's in the Sikhs' interest to distance themselves from the West. So again, they're polarising things in a very different matter. We've looked at, certainly on this channel, we've suggested that the most likely and perhaps the best outcome is that the Khalistan should be allied with the West, and India can carry on allying with Russia and China, etc., can do its own thing. But what this person is suggesting actually is that India and the West will finally join an alliance and that Khalistan should actually align with China. Now, I'll tell you one thing, China would love that because China is looking to break south through the Himalayas into and potentially join up with the Indian Ocean. And this, of course, would give them a route towards the Indian Ocean, a hugely, massively strategic benefit to China. China would jump at this. China, I have absolutely no doubt, and if nothing else to stir up trouble against India, China would definitely support Khalistan. Of that I have no doubt about. Is it right for Khalistan? I don't know. It's up for the Sikh community to decide if that is a direction they want to take. Personally, I don't think that's a good idea. I don't trust the Chinese. The Chinese are very clever. I like the Chinese in many ways. They are the people themselves. I've got Chinese friends who are very good people. The Chinese leadership, I have a very strong suspicion about, and I do fear for their ambitions globally. And I think Khalistan, in my personal opinion, would be better aligned with a democratic West. Don't forget, China is not a democracy. Khalistan and everything the Sikh community stands for is essentially democracy. So naturally and philosophically, it is aligned with the West. But James, I don't know if you have any thoughts on this. This is a fascinating, different direction to look at things.
It is a beautiful way to take the direction and to give a different point of perspective there. So that's great. And I think that if Khalistan is to happen, I think that once that is proven and once it is accepted, I think that there could be some really good relational benefits to both India and Khalistan moving into the future as opposed to looking at the past. So I don't know if I would want to see them, partnering up or teaming up with China in any regard, because I don't think it would benefit or that they could trust the government there. I love the Chinese people, but the government I have, just like you, Angus, many questionable opinions about.
Yeah, I think that the fundamental flaw in this idea is that philosophically China and Khalistan are diametrically opposed. They are based on two completely different social ideologies. Sikhi stands completely against everything that Chinese communism stands for. So yes. An interesting thought, though. Very interesting thought. Thank you for that comment. That was a fascinating one. Avtar Singh says, what about the RSS-backed politicians in the USA and the UK? They're doing the dirty work. You certain reporters who didn't leave their residence. And this is back to the riots I was talking about in the UK. Saying, I think this person's implying that Sikhs, that some reporters were saying that Sikhs were rioting and that our reporters are whipping up, again, this hatred. They are behind a lot of this, and they in turn are backed by politicians who in turn are backed by the RSS. So I think this whole comment is basically saying that a lot of, particularly the divisions in the UK and particularly amongst the rioters, is parts of it are coming from RSS-backed politicians. I think that is not strictly true. I think some of it, though, and I think one thing that you're definitely right about is that some of our politicians are influenced by the RSS. I think they are involved to some degree. I think the reasons for our rioting are complex. There are no simple reasons. They are very complex. But I think you're right to some degree. I think that there is an influence here. I think the RSS particularly would be delighted seeing the division in British society that is being created. I think they would be delighted to see the right-wing extremists, because of course the Indian right wing will align with the British right wing in many ways. So it is quite likely that there is some dirty work, as you call it, going on behind the scenes. And I think definitely we've seen it in Canada, James, as you reported, haven't we? We've seen the RSS influencing to smaller and greater extents things going on in Canada.
That's right.
So there's no doubt, I think, here in the UK.
It's just something that we're seeing on and on, right? It's, you know, how they manipulate, motivate, and recruit, so...
Indeed. Right, let's move on because we are, again, way out of time. So we'll rush through the last few comments. User something or other says, yeah, it's very sad that in so-called democracies, people can't even comment on a video. They'll come after you. They'll take your assets away. They'll freeze your bank accounts, make your life hell. And this, again, refers back to a comment yesterday where they couldn't give their real name. Yeah, and this is absolutely true. And again, the signs of an undemocratic situation where even if on social media you're afraid to make a statement because they'll come after you at home. And one other thing, this links to many of my guests on the podcast who live in the West, but they've got family in the Punjab. When they speak out in the West, and it's not just my podcast guests, but many activists in the West who speak out against the Indian regime, their families back in the Punjab are targeted. It's cowardly. It's really cowardly. Again, it's completely undemocratic. It's an appalling sign of what a state India has become. Right, final set of questions. And again, sadly, with the race against time, we must rush through these. Jay Singh, after Indian government backed the fake democracy government in Bangladesh collapsed and now fake democracy in India is next. Truth will prevail. Khalistan is the only solution. Yes, Khalistan is the only solution. I totally agree with that. We've talked about Bangladesh and we did touch upon earlier in the show, James, that, who is next? Who indeed is next? Could India be next? Do you think India could be next, James?
I do, yeah, and it's just a matter of, geopolitics and who's supporting who on the public end while they're making trade deals or backroom deals. It's like somebody giving you $10 to your face and taking the wallet out of your pocket in the back at the same time, right? Exactly.
And our final set of comments, I had to put these in just to celebrate the joyous battle between our two resident foes. Cruella, people within Punjab do want Khalistan, and Guvial comes straight back, unsurprisingly, where are they? And Cruella comes back, who the hell are you that I have to tell you? Open your eyes and look around. I don't think I can comment further than that, James, but thank you to both of you. That was a great battle across the comments column, James.
Exactly. So thanks everyone for watching, and let Angus take us out here because the comments are amazing. Also, let us know if you would like to see a special report with more information about the recruitment and gang activity, RSS, and so forth about the recruiting. I'd love to do a special report if it's something you want to see.
Indeed, absolutely. And as we are way over time as usual, we must wrap things up. But of course, you have been watching Perspectives. Don't forget to keep those comments coming in, keep those debates lively, and of course, please keep them civil as they have been so far. Much appreciated for all that. Don't forget, you can message us directly at message@satellagetv.com. Let us know anything that you'd like to tell us, any news stories that you'd like us to cover, or just simply anything that you'd like to comment about. But until next time, you have been watching Perspectives. It is goodbye from me, and it is goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
You have, of course, been watching Perspectives. We'll see you next time.